Hi, thanks for tuning in today to Front Porch Conversations here at Advent Christian Village. I'm so glad you could join us, and I'd like to introduce you to our guests today, Robbie and Virginia Robertson. Thank you so much for being here.
Our pleasure.
And speaking of being here, you've been around a long time here. So first, let's find out more about you, where you began and where you were born and some of your early childhood experiences.
Ladies first.
Okay.
Ladies first. I was born in North Carolina. My family moved to Central Florida in the mid-40s. I have a sister who still lives in the same place we moved to in the mid-40s. We have lived several different places throughout Florida.
Where in North Carolina were you born?
Winston-Salem. I have a granddaughter who was also born in Winston-Salem. I don't know how many years later. Long time.
And Robbie, what about you?
I was born in Tampa. This is as far north as I've ever lived, and I'm not going any further. It's too cold up here for me. I'm a southern boy.
So you're a native Floridian.
Native Floridian. I'm
We've
one
done
of these
a lot.
old-timey crackers.
We've done a lot of Front Porch Conversations, and the majority of us aren't native-born
Correct.
Floridians.
We understand. I tell folks up here who don't know me, I'm a refugee from Central Florida, and I tell them I had to leave because of the pollution. They have two major types of pollution down there. One is called cars, and the other is called people. And you can't drive around, you can't stir around, and you're always crowded in. And that's why we love it here.
Virginia, tell us one of your fond childhood memories, or several if you want.
I guess one of my most outstanding memories in reflection, when we lived in North Carolina, I thought we lived in a big city, although not nearly as big as it is now. At age 8 to 10, I would get on the city bus by myself and ride all over town for different purposes and get home before dark. And I can't do that now.
No.
No way I could do that now. And then I don't remember what year, my granddaughter was born there, and I got to go back and visit. And it's a big city. No way would I do that, even at my age today.
Robbie, what about you?
Well, I'll just tell you one thing. I always have to have my claim to fortune. I graduated from Clearwater High School. I was in the marching band there. We were invited. We were the first band in the state of Florida to have flag twirlers. And we were invited to go to the Cherry Blossom Festival in Washington, D.C. And we were adjudged the very best marching unit in the parade that year.
Wonderful.
So, hey, we were just right on top of it, man.
Now, were you a flag twirler, or did you play an instrument?
No, I played one of the little ones called a sousaphone, and I'm probably one of the littlest guys that ever toed a sousaphone. And if you saw our unit coming down the road, there'd be one sousaphone up here and one down here. This was me. So we had a good time, and that leads me into what I really want to say today about some of our younger years. And I want to say that this is part of our, people always ask me what your testimony is. Well, this is part of our testimony, but it's a story, if you'll allow me to tell it.
Absolutely.
September 28th, 1955, I was sitting at my desk in Stetson University on the second floor. It was hot. We didn't have air conditioning in those days, and so had the windows open and the door to the hallway open, and I'm sitting there trying to study. This was my third semester. And behind me, a voice said, "Hey, you want a cup of coffee and a peanut butter sandwich?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "I'm in the car down at the end of the steps." Said, "Come on down." Well, I looked around, I grabbed a shirt, and I think I had on flip-flops, and I went trucking down the stairway and to the Stairway ended right at the sidewalk about 5 foot wide. And he said, jump in the back. And I opened the door. And I'll let her pick up the story there and tell you what happened up to that point.
I'll try to condense it. I had a job. I had a car. I had a roommate. Roommate met a young man she wanted to date. He didn't have a car. He wanted to borrow my car, and I said, I go where my car goes. So he fixed me up, if you will, with a series of blind dates. And the next to the last one was to the drive-in theater, movie theater. I was sitting in the back seat on one side of the seat, and my date was sitting on the opposite side of the seat. 30 minutes into the movie, I had my door open, watching the movie between the frame of the car door and the frame of the car. And he was right here. So I told Jack that I needed to go home. I had a headache. And he said, good, we'll take you home, and then we'll take Lee home. I said, no, we'll take Lee home, and then we'll take me home. And as soon as Lee got out of the car, I said, if you ever do me that way again, you will never drive my car again. One more man I want you to meet. And that's when we went to Stetson. And he was a blind date, and he's the only one I've had since then.
Now that's
And so
a story.
let me pick up a story
All
right
right.
there, because you know the hymn says, all I have needed thy hand has provided, great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. At that moment in my life, I had no idea. I opened the car door, and there she sat. God delivered her to my doorstep. To my doorstep. I wasn't looking for anybody, anything. I was struggling trying to stay in Stetson University because I wasn't smart enough to do that. But he brought her there. Now, on April 6th, we will have been married 66 years. We will start our 67th year. And from that point on, that's been my life. Now then, that's not the end of the story. The story was, I was a substitute. Jack Zickafus was his name. He went upstairs down the hall for me to get a fella. And that fella wasn't there. And he was desperate. So when he came by my door and saw me, he just hollered at me because he had to have somebody. And I was that somebody. And I went down there, and the rest of it's a lot of history. But now I want to move you forward almost 20 years. I don't remember exactly what it was. But almost 20 years later, when our two daughters were attending Stetson University, and they were adopted, if you will, by some people in the Stetson Baptist Church, and they would come home at different times and tell us what great people these were, et cetera, and how much they did for them and all of this stuff. And we thought, and one day, I don't know what, we asked them, well, what is their name? And our oldest daughter gave us the name. And the name was the man that Jack had gone to get to bring for her date. And I was the substitute. Now, if you don't think God has a sense of humor, look what he did to us. And of course, they were amazed. They didn't know. They didn't really know the story. That's when we started telling the story, because that is my life. Now we've done a bunch of other things, but that's the most important thing that's ever happened. And we did those vows and says, till death do we part. And we've since learned that we may be separated for just a little while, but we're going to be together forever. I can't say it any better than that.
That's a wonderful story, but it's true, a very true story, and founded in faith. And
It is.
That's the best kind of stories to me. And it has a happy ending. Look at this.
Oh, well, it didn't end yet.
Well, I know, but I'm told,
To this point.
to this point.
To this point.
And I
it
feel sure it will be.
be a happy ending.
How long after that blind date was it until you got married?
From September 28th to April 6th. Not
6
long.
months.
Not long. She says I'm infatuated.
He is.
I can tell by the look on your face you are, yes. What did your daughters, how did they react when they learned the full story?
Well, they were just amazed. I don't remember the exact reaction, but can't be. And I said, well, I don't remember what all I said back then. I talk a lot, as you've noticed. I don't remember what all I said. But they were surprised, and we never have. I don't recall if we ever met him again.
Never encountered. They were beyond the point where they were still part of this adoptive family, if you will.
Sure.
But it was quite a shocker.
I bet it was. Now, Virginia, did you work in DeLand, or where were you working when you?
I was working in DeLand, and my family lived 4 blocks from the Stetson University campus. And I was very familiar with it, although not nearly as familiar as driving up to the door of a men's dormitory. But I had an escort that day.
She became very familiar after that.
What did you do as far as your education? Did you finish at Stetson or?
No, ma'am. I went to Stetson on a music scholarship, and they didn't take them very long to discover that I didn't have any more musical talent than any Tom, Dick, or Harry going down the road. And I wasn't going to be a spectacular musician at that time. And at that time, their main emphasis was 16th and 17th century and church music and organ, etc. So I developed a great appreciation, if that's what it is. I wanted to teach music in a public school system. Well, they said, you're never going to get it. I don't have hand-eye coordination. If I look at a note and I'm playing, then I have to remember that's a C, and that's fingers 2 and 3. And then blow. And that's just too slow. That doesn't work in music. So you have to be different. So I left and married her.
And then what?
Oh, and then what? Mm-hmm. Oh, a bunch of things. Most of my business life, I was in the insurance industry. Mm-hmm. I became a licensed agent when I was 20 years old, and I held that license for over 50 years. I gave it up after I came here. I did a multiplicity of things. I was an agent. I was a field supervisor. I was invited to come into the home office. I became assistant director of training. Then I was a sales promotion officer. Then I was director of training for the 2 sales divisions that we had, what we call combination and ordinary. And after a number of years there, some people came in from Texas and bought the company out for management, and they came in, and the polite way to say that, the morals of the people I had to work with went so far down that I had to grit my teeth every morning to go to work, and I just quit doing that. And I just turned around and walked off and left it. And after I came here, Phillips Center is a part of that history. I was with Gulf Life Insurance Company. That was founded by T.T. and Edwin Phillips. Edwin Phillips' widow is the one who gave the money for the Phillips Center. And Pomeroy told me that story after I was here. He wanted to know where I've been. And I told him, well, I've spent a quarter of a century or so with Gulf Life. Oh, he said, our association. I said, no, unless it's Phillips, because I know that Phillips name. Uh-huh. Yeah. And so I've really enjoyed that. if you go to Jacksonville and you look at, there's a building up there on the river, and the corners do not come together. They come like that. And at the time that we, being Gulf Life, when we built that building, it was the largest pre-stressed post-tension concrete structure in the world. And we had people coming from all over the world to see that building. So we were very proud of that. And that was a lot to walk away from. And when I walked away from that and started what we call, quotes, a scratch agency. In other words, I had a contract with a company to sell their product, and I still have a little sign about like that that says Robbie Robertson Insurance Agency. It's about that big. And I hung that up over a door of an office. And that's how I started. And 20 some odd years later, we sold that because we had developed a computer program back before they had them in local agencies, et cetera. And with a computer, you have the ability to send out perfect communication because you use that template and you just fill in. Nobody else had it, so the fellow who wound up buying our agency, he saw that and we want to know how we did it. That's another whole long story I won't get into. But anyway, we did that. Then we started looking for a place to retire.
Okay, can we hold on a minute?
Sure.
Because I want to ask Virginia, what were you doing during all that time?
I was beside him.
So you
We
all
worked
always
together,
been in,
yes.
And tell us about your daughters.
We have 2 daughters and a son. All are married, living wherever around. None of them are none of them live really close.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I should have said. Tell us about your children.
Children, yes.
How many grandchildren?
We have 3 grandchildren. 3 at last count, 3 great grandchildren. None of them live close by here.
And so, how did you get to Advent Christian Village or Dowling Park?
When we were running our business, the business was a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and he was asked to be on the board. And I don't remember exactly how John Knox Village came into that, but he was familiar with that, which is a retirement community in Orange City. And we read an ad, I guess, about the village and this village, and had been visiting a sick friend in Georgia, and on the way back to Central Florida, drove through Dowling Park. And we would look around and go home and think about it, go somewhere else, go home and think about it. And we did that for a period of 2 years. We'd come here, go home, go somewhere else, come home, come here, go home, And we did that for about 2 years, and finally ended up buying property off campus because we have a motorhome, and they wouldn't let us park our motorhome in our yard,
Right.
which is what we wanted to do.
And so, how long ago was that?
We moved into our newly constructed home on our 46th wedding anniversary, which was 20 years ago in 2 weeks.
And so I think you made a good choice. We're glad you're here.
I think we did as well.
Tell us about, have you volunteered at the village? And I know Robbie has volunteered in the Grapevines for a long time.
When we first came, we thought we had to be members of the village to volunteer, so therefore we waited until we became members of the village, which was immediately, But we would go to Copeland Center every day. We thought we needed it, and we did. But they needed help, and we started volunteering at Copeland Center. That was most of our volunteering, although we did little bits of stuff other places. Several years after we moved here, we went to work for the village and worked in a conference and retreat with Susie Hudson, Judy McCall, Doug Mabey, for 6 years. And since then, he has been more involved with the grapevines, and I've not done as much volunteering as I had before. But I used to be on demand, call me if I answer the phone, I'll come. And it got to the point where people would call and say, "Can you do this for me in 2 weeks?" And I said, "No, I'm not committing like that." Because we like to get in the motorhome on a whim and just drive off. And can't do both.
Well, I'm glad I caught you between trips of driving off to be here today. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
While we're talking about grapevines, let me
Do your
make an
advertisement.
appeal. I am getting to the stage of maturity where my infirmities won't let me do all of the things that I need to do at the grapevine, and we desperately need someone to come in and take charge of it. They don't have to do all the work, but they need to be in charge of it and see that things are done. And gosh, call me, call Eleanor, but we really do need somebody. So when you're seeing this, think of the grapevines. Everybody enjoys them.
Yes. And the deer do too sometimes.
Oh, yes.
But if for people who are watching and they don't know where our grapevines are.
Well, they're located, I'm not good on directions, but they're located on the main drive. After you pass the administration building, okay, which they built since we were here, and you come down and you look over on the left, that's where they are. And in that open field there, I understand that's where the expansion of Dossier Manor is going to be, in there. And Mr. Skanks told me years ago, back when I first complained that I was getting physically not able to do it, and I said, "Are we going to keep those, or what's going to happen?" He said, "They are an integral part of this village. They were started by Bob Christ, who's Reverend Bob Christ, has since passed away, and then Otto Hoonerwaddle took care of them for a number of years, and then Otto got to where with his neuropathy, he was afraid he would fall. He did fall out there one day, and that wasn't, and so one day Millie Griswold called me and said, "You're in charge of the grapevine," because I'd been helping Otto. So that's how that all came about. Now I want to make one other point.
Sure.
The reason we're here in this village is because Virginia has longevity in her genes. Her mother lived within a few months of being 100, okay? All of her daddy's people live 100 or so, okay? And I needed a place to take care of her. And having had the privilege of serving on the board of John Knox Village, I knew what a good retirement community could do for you. And so that's why we started looking. And so it's amazing to me. I've been here 20 years. I should have been dead years ago. The proof of that is I bought a 10-year term policy 3 times. Outlived all 3 times. And within the last couple of months, I got a letter from the insurance company of the first policy that I bought. And at that time, what they call ordinary life or whole life was life paid up at age 85. And I got a letter recently and said, "You've lived so long, we're not going to take any more of your money. You've paid all the premiums again." And I had forgotten, because I figured we'd pay those till she gets the money, you know. So you want to know what's amazing about this village? It's amazing that they have taken such good care of us, that we're here.
And tell our viewers what you like to do when you get in your motorhome. Where do you like to go?
Oh, like to go to state parks, like to go to national parks. We're not resort people. We don't need to go and have the hot tubs and the slides and all of that.
Or be entertained.
Or be entertained. We go to some of the rallies from some of the associations, and but mostly we just like to go and get in nature. That's why I live in the boonies. If you go looking for my house, you barely can see it now because everything's dead. But when it gets all green, you won't be able to see it on the dirt road that I live on. And that's why we enjoy it. And your new pastor moved in next to us, and I just talked to him briefly. I was asking him, he said, we really like it here. It's so quiet and it's so private. And I said, yes, sir. I understand. That's why we're here.
Virginia, what about camping do you like? Are there other things you like about it?
I like going out and not being tied to a schedule of any kind. I do like being away from the busyness of life. I like to puzzle, jigsaw puzzle. I like to read. Do a lot of both of those while we're gone. We're supposed to get out and walk, but it's usually either very hot or very cold, and so we don't do so much walking. But I just like to get in it and go. We made one trip out west, should have started years earlier and didn't, but thoroughly enjoyed that. Went all the way to Yellowstone and Grand Canyon and back.
That's quite a drive.
That's quite a drive. We took 7 weeks to do that.
I want to ask each of you one last question.
Okay.
What would be your advice for a young person today?
Go to church.
Robbie? As I tell my youngsters and the friend, the most important thing you'll ever do in your life is the relationship you develop with your God. And until you do that, you haven't been successful. I don't care what the rest of the world says. Until you do that, you haven't been successful, and that is success, and everything else will fall in place after that. Then the other thing is work hard and work late. Our motto at Gulf Life used to be, don't work hard enough to hurt yourself, but work as hard as you can, even if it kills you. And when you ain't doing nothing else, hurry. And if you do real good, we'll let you stay.
Well, what advice? My goodness. Thank you both for sitting down with me and chatting, and for our visitors to get to know you better.
We thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll tune in again for another episode of Front Porch Conversations.